Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Coming to you from Santa Fe, New Mexico, I'm Scott Harrison, Artistic Director of Ironweed Productions, and I want to welcome you to Talking Theater Santa Fe. Talking Theater Santa Fe is a series of conversations between me and Santa Fe theater artists, sharing stories about their experiences in the theater and the unique paths that led them to creating theater in Santa Fe. I'm very honored to have as my guest this evening, Santa Fe director, actor, producer, and the artistic director of the Santa Fe Playhouse, Robyn Rikoon. Robyn, thanks so much for joining me tonight.
Thank you so much for having me.
in our Zoom connected world. A little bit more about Robyn before we start. Robyn was born and raised in New Mexico. She earned her BFA in drama from the North Carolina School for the Arts. She's worked as a professional actor in television, film, and theater throughout New York City, Portland, Oregon, Minneapolis, and New Mexico. In 2012, Robyn founded and ran an arts collective in Brooklyn, New York, where she created site-specific work based on Carl Jung's The Red Book. In 2015, she ventured around the world and studied in Southeast Asia, South America, and Mexico. After receiving the Keenan Fellowship for directing at the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts in September of 2017, Robyn worked as a director and actor in and around the nation's capital. Passionate about the power of live arts and community, she now serves as artistic director of the Santa Fe Playhouse. So, Robyn, I always like to start at the beginning. Just wanted to ask you if you can recall the first time that you remember just having being excited by the imagination or by make-believe, play acting, not necessarily theater, just when you were a kid. And this was the first time I was enthralled by make-believe or play acting.
Yeah, that's a great question. I was lucky enough to grow up with a younger sister, and I have pretty clear memories. And then my parents tell me a lot that I think I must have been, 5, 6, and my sister was 3 and 4, and I would come up with these elaborate schemes when I knew that our parents were going to have guests over for dinner. And I would write plays verbally with my sister. I would spend all day with her in her room, assigning characters to the stuffed animals and the Barbies and our little figurines. And then, of course, my sister. And then I would play, 6 different roles. and then after dinner, or maybe it was before dinner, I would make everybody sit on the couch in the living room, and we would put on these performances. And sometimes they were theater based, sometimes they were just putting on Peter Gabriel and dancing around with beanies and rulers. And I would videotape, on the camcorder, our animals. And then my sister and I would do the voices for the animals. And that's really my earliest memory of kind of the creative spark.
Yeah. So you were like writing then at that point. I mean, these whole scenarios, and wow. Now, did you the whole thing of kind of so did you enjoy doing different voices? I mean, the whole, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I still really do love, I love dialect work.
Me too. Yeah.
And I think when I was a kid, they were larger than life, very hammy, doing voices like this and weird little things. But yeah,
that's very, yeah, that's cool. Yeah, it's funny because I love dialects too. Like, I just feel like when I had the opportunity that a character has a dialect, and it's like, man, this is just such a great anchor into who this person is, because you're just, it's just such a specific way of speaking. And to me, it brings out this whole other world for me just by, anchoring in a dialect. That's really cool. Well, it's funny too to hear you say how how kind of serious it was with your family, you know, like having, because I remember my very first kind of producing experience was I was 7 and we lived in West Point, and two friends of mine and I, we uh, we we created this concert, and we were the three of us. We lip synced to the Archies, and we had like our instruments. But the thing is, we had this whole, we rehearsed it, and then we had a dress rehearsal that we were going to have, and we had chairs set out for the neighbors and everything. But it was our dress rehearsal, and our parents started coming in, wandering in to watch the dress rehearsal, and I was adamant. I was like, "You cannot watch this. This is a dress rehearsal." Like, it's like 7 years old.
Oh my God. So
Uh,
even then you knew the rules.
exactly. Yeah.
Right,
Exactly. You
right.
guys got to come back tomorrow.
And was that your first like creative venture, was doing the lip syncing to the Archies, or did you have an earlier?
Well, I was always like really into superheroes when I was a kid, and so I loved to like dress up as superheroes, like even like just during the year, like not Halloween, and just
Right.
pretend like I was Batman, like going around, you know, save the neighborhood or whatever. So, but it was the same thing. I would love to create a voice, you know, for, you know, there's the Batman voice and Spider-Man voice, and so.
Right.
Do you
Right.
remember your so when was your first performing experience, like whether it was school or like before an audience?
You know what? I think my very first, do you remember the book Eloise?
Oh
It's
yeah.
a series of children's books.
Yeah.
And then there was Eloise and Pippi Longstocking.
Mhm.
And I don't remember who did it. It was somebody here in Santa Fe, because I grew up here. And so it had to have been here. And I played Eloise. And I remember I got to do the entire show in roller skates, because she's
Wow.
like, she lives in the Plaza Hotel and she roller skates everywhere and she creates chaos wherever she goes. I mean, it's kind of about, an entitled white child who's living in a hotel. But that I remember, I mean, I didn't have any training. It wasn't at Santa Fe Performing Arts, with the kids that Chris Leslie ran then, and then it turned into Pandemonium, which I did later.
Oh
This
cool.
show was before that.
Uh,
And I wish I knew more details, but I just remember I had been obsessed with the books, and then I got to play this character, and it was so much fun.
oh man.
Yeah.
Do you remember what do you remember kind of what it felt like being in front of an audience and doing the kind of the first time?
You know, I can only imagine and remember that it was just thrilling. There's something about being in front of an audience that when I was a kid, it felt more exciting than it ever has as an adult, because as an adult, there are nerves involved.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I get nervous every single time, no matter how many times I've done a show
Yeah.
but as a kid, I just remember being just loving the spotlight, loving attention, especially loving, making people laugh.
Oh cool.
Just I think I would do, I would pretend to run into walls and
Uh-huh.
trip and to make my parents laugh, and people. Anytime I had a captive audience, I was happy.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, so you were with Santa Fe Performing Arts, and I didn't realize Chris Leslie. So he was heading it when you were there. Is that?
He was, and
And
that
were you
must
with Vaughn there? Was Vaughn
yeah.
at the same time? Oh
So
yeah.
we overlapped a couple years. We did one show together, which was the Pirates of Penzance, and I think he played like a pretty big role, maybe the main pirate. And and Chris had written in. I was a really tiny child,
Uh,
and um, there was an actor in town. His name is Tristan. I can't remember his last name, but he played the cop, the policeman. And Chris had written in a role, and I was his silent sidekick. So I just followed the policeman everywhere he went. I did what he did. It was very Charlie
oh
Chaplin-esque.
man,
I didn't have any lines, and it was awesome. It
that's
was just,
that's so
yeah,
cool.
Yeah.
Wow. Now, is that because you were saying it was kind of had the Charlie Chaplin feel to it? Because I know you've done dance as well. Was dance something that you were involved in when you were young too, or
Yeah, I
yeah?
danced. I took classes here in Santa Fe from a teacher named Pearl. Miss Pearl is how I knew her.
Mhm.
Um, and then I went to St. Michael's High School for seventh, eighth, and ninth grade, and all those 3 years I was on the Pony Express, which is like kick dancing,
Mhm.
like the Rockettes. So I did that for a few years, and then when I went to School of the Arts, we took jazz, tap, a little bit of ballet, and no partner dances or anything like that. But I've always loved dance, and modern dance
Yeah,
was,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. But clowning also, is a passion of mine, and how
Oh
physical
wow,
that
yeah.
is. So
I That's cool because I remember, man, I for grad school I went to ART and we had this a class, a 6 week class with this teacher Jane Nichols in European clown. And I remember thinking before the class, I thought, oh man, I felt really intimidated about it because I thought, man, it's just going to be about being wacky and funny and clown, I just had this image of a clown being, just, oh, I've got to be funny. And I learned more about being vulnerable in that class. And I've learned, it was so, her whole approach was just about simplicity and vulnerability. And it was really fascinating and eye opening for me. Yeah,
yeah.
interesting. When did you first kind of when was your first exposure to clown kind of
It
work?
was at School of the Arts.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an amazing program. It's a 4-year program, but I actually went to School of the Arts my senior year of high school as well. They have a 1-year drama program for high schoolers, and Robert Francisconi is the clown teacher, and he calls it mask class.
Mhm.
And that was my first exposure to it, and you get kind of a crash course in as a senior in high school, but then you spend 4 years going from neutral, so like a black face hood where you wear, black light,
Mhm.
everything tight, so you can see, really see the shapes of bodies, and then a
Mhm.
black face hood, and then you slowly progress over every semester through to full mask, right? Where you're given, so first they strip you down to nothing.
Mhm. Mhm.
Then they put on the most, enormous thing that you could think of, but it's all in the face. And you have to, you decide on a body to match that mask.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
like you're saying, it working with the physical really touches into the internal,
Yeah.
to the inside. And then it was half mask, and then then you're able to use language and sounds, and then you move, the last step is the red nose,
Uh-huh.
and that's the highest level. But it's almost like the black face hood and the red nose are the most similar,
Mm. Mhm.
because with the classic clown, it is about simplicity, and it's about listening
Mhm.
and connecting to your audience and knowing what one person in the audience needs, right? And just going
Yeah.
and
Right.
touching specifically,
Right.
making connections to each person, which I think is beautiful,
Yeah.
like really such a gift of live theater, just being able to connect. But the classic clownings, yeah.
That's
uh,
cool to hear the whole process of it. Yeah, and yeah, I just remember just the feeling of feeling so present, in that in that work. I mean, um, yeah, and the we got to do some mask work as well, and just like you said, I mean, the physical freedom that you can find when you have a mask, and how that becomes part of who you are, and then how does that, yeah, that's really cool. Wow, so you were there for 5 years then.
yep.
Man, that's wow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
think there were 4 of us who moved on from the high school program into the conservatory program.
Wow. So so in high school, did you pretty much have the feeling of, this is what I want to pursue? This is what theater is what I want to do?
No, I definitely had a moment. You know, it's like, yeah, I think I've always had a couple different voices in my head about what I should be doing,
Yeah.
right? My life. And especially in high school, I had already been away from home for 2 years at that point because I went to boarding school my sophomore and junior year in Massachusetts. And then School of the Arts was also a boarding school for my senior year.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved being on my own and away from my family, but I still was very much influenced by them. And I don't think they really saw acting or the theater world as being a viable way to make money and support myself. And so I definitely had, I applied to a bunch of different colleges and a bunch of different schools, and I was either going to go into law or stay with acting. And I figured, okay, well, if I'm a lawyer, it's still acting. I'm still going to be in front of an audience. I'm making my case. I'm fighting for something.
Right.
But at the end of the day, after I got into the schools, I remember sitting in the quad at School of the Arts and looking at the stars and talking to a good friend of mine and feeling really torn about it. And he just said, you have to follow your gut. You have to follow your heart and think about what it would be like never to be on stage again. And could you live with that? Could you be happy with that? And ultimately my answer was no.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Wow. But I also don't think that you have to go to a conservatory program to be successful as an actor or director. So. Yeah,
I agree. Yeah, I feel like I know sometimes we, in getting to talk to students and, high school students and things, one of the things I feel like I've learned is I felt like when I was younger, I would get presented with this message of, there's only one way to do it. There's only one way to be an artist. There's only one way to be an actor or a theater person. You have to do da 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 da. And I've just found through my experience and through other people's that, there are as many paths as there are people, in terms of where you can go, what training or not training you have, or, it's
yeah. And I wish I had known that back then. I think my path would have been different, but that's just wishful thinking because our path. So.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Did you go to an undergrad conservatory program?
No, I stumbled on, it's one of those things I look back and I think, thank God things happened the way they did. I was in undergrad and I had never done any theater, and we had to take a fine arts class, for our general studies. And so we had to choose between music, art, and theater. And I was in the band, so I was like, well, I don't want to, want to do something different. So it was really between art and theater. And I was like, I don't really know which one I want to do. And I asked my roommate, I said, I got to take one of these. And he said, well, I took art last semester and the teacher's really boring. It's like, all right, well, I guess I'll do theater. And I had this incredible teacher, Alan Lindrup, who was teaching, he taught intro to theater, but he gave us like hands-on experience in every aspect of theater. Like he had us all write a short scene. He had us all like research a play as if we were directing it, do a little set design. And then at the end, he picked 5 scenes and he divided us up and we performed them. So we really got to expose to like every piece of theater in this intro class. And I totally fell in love with it, so it was, I literally, it was like, if I hadn't asked my roommate that question, I might be, who knows where I'd be right now. But so, yeah, I stumbled on it in undergrad.
Wow, that is
So
amazing.
yeah,
But did you have a area of interest that you were focused on in undergrad?
yeah, psychology, which was very
Oh,
helpful. And yeah, yeah. So, but yeah, and then the theater department there was actually just an interesting little side story. One of my first teachers is best friends with Benny Benedetti.
oh,
So this was 1984, and I distinctly remember this. My teacher, Tom Arthur, um, we were in theater class, and he said I'm going to be off all next week because I'm going to visit my good friend Robert Benedetti, who lives in California. And then he came back, and Benny was at that time working with Ted Danson. And so Tom told us, he's like, oh, I got to go on the set of Cheers, and I got to meet all the actors. And so I was like, who knew that, 30 some years later, we'd live in the same town, but
wow.
yeah.
Amazing.
Well, when you were talking about, yeah, just that, and we were just talking about the different paths that people take. And I'm really interested in, you traveled and studied in Thailand, in Indonesia, Cambodia, and Peru. Just talk about what inspired that adventure, and then just how some of those experiences you feel shaped you as a person and as an artist.
Yeah. I mean, what really inspired that section of my life was my mother had a stroke, and she was living in North Carolina at the time, and I was in New York, and I had just, I think, we finished our second show, The Web, with Archaic Remnants, based on Jung's work. Mm-hmm. And I was living in this like tiny studio. I mean, it was probably 200 square feet that I had just like, and it was really high ceilings. So I had kind of built levels in it. And I don't know, I was in a weird place in my life. And my mom had a stroke, and I hadn't lived at home since I was 14. And I kind of realized that I hadn't spent much time with her. Mm-hmm. And so as she started her healing process, she started practicing Qigong. And she found this teacher in Thailand that she wanted to go and study with. And so she called me up and she said, hey, do you want to come to Thailand with me? And I was like, yeah, I do. I would love that, actually. Like, what am I doing here?
Wow. Yeah.
And so, I mean, it was December, so it was cold. And the thought of going to a tropical place just sounded amazing. And I said, you know what, Mom, I'll go to Thailand with you, but then we have to travel. Like, we have to go some other places. And she said, okay, well, I'll do my best, and we'll see how it goes. Mm-hmm. So we went to Thailand with to go study with this teacher. And we spent 6 weeks doing like sacred feminine Qigong workshop together, which was really amazing. And I met some incredible women there. And actually it was because of the women who I met in that workshop that eventually took me to Peru. So then my mom and I, we went to, it was really a spiritual journey, and I feel like, and most actors do feel this way, that acting is a spiritual, it's kind of a spiritual path, right? Mm-hmm. So you have the psychology part, and then you have to be able to open yourself up and be vulnerable and, be able to really listen and open your heart to your character, but also to everyone who you're in the room with. And so I started looking into a bunch of different spiritual practices when I was over there, because the Qigong had been so amazing and eye-opening, and Southeast Asia is so rich with so many different cultures and spiritual practices. So we went to Bali, and I stayed in a shaking ashram for 10 days. And that was, my mom didn't really participate that much because you plant your feet on the ground and you just shake your whole body for like 6 hours a day. And it opens up all the blockages, you know, in your body, and you're doing it yourself. And it's really like hard work, but it's really amazing actually how you feel after that. And then we went to Cambodia, and I was, you know, I'm going back to the clown thing. The Cambodian circus is like this incredible, they're just incredible gymnasts and incredible clowns there. And so I would go to the circus like every night, and then during the day my mom and I would go and explore in Angkor Wat and go and look at the, you know, all the etchings, and just there's just so much beauty and so much amazing food and people and colors, everything there. And then she left. No, then we went to Chiang Mai, and I sat in darkness for 10 days.
Oh, I saw, what was that like? I mean,
so I did that, Scott, because
so that happened.
Because I was like really interested in how to have a quote unquote psychedelic experience without taking drugs. So I do practice meditation, and I have for quite some time. Not always regularly, but you know, the pineal gland, it excretes DMT when you're born and when you die. And the only other time that you can create it naturally is if you sit in complete darkness, or you live in darkness for a certain amount of time. And the shortest period of time that you can do it is 10 days. So I had met this woman in Thailand on Koh Phangan, and she told me about the darkness. And I was like, oh, great. And so I like called this center, and they didn't have any room. And then it was like 2 days before we were going to leave, and they got in touch with me, and they said, we just had an opening. And so we went to Chiang Mai, and I got to sit in darkness for 10 days. And it was really, really wonderful. I mean, I had one day where I freaked out. I mean, I did a meditation where you go backwards in your life to like your earliest memories. And I just realized how ungrateful I had been to all of my teachers and to my parents. And it was such a profound realization that first I just went into a tailspin of guilt, you know, and feeling really badly. And then I realized, well, my parents are still here. They're still on this earth and in this plane with me. And I can change. I can be grateful and like live in that way. And that was really, that was a deep awakening for me. But the physical things that I noticed is you start to be able to feel objects further and further away. It's like the first day I'm running into things, right? I'm walking really, really slowly and getting my bearings. But by day 4 or 5, man, I could like feel a pillar or a table from like 4 feet away.
Wow.
And it was amazing. And I didn't see fractals or anything when I was in the darkness, but when I came out of the darkness, I mean, my vision was like, it was as if I had taken psychedelics. Like I could see, you know, everything was alive, and I could see the breath, and I could see the auras and the colors of everything. And it was, it was wild. It was wild.
Wow. So did you, and when you came out of the experience, I mean, did you feel, or maybe there's just multiple things, but I mean, did you feel a certain sense of, I don't know what the word is, loss of having to leave that world that you'd suddenly been, do you know what I mean? Or was there some sort of like not wanting to then be just assaulted by the world the way it is kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a good question. I I think that was more, I didn't want to leave Thailand,
Mhm.
really.
Yeah.
Um,
Interesting.
I think like being in the darkness was really comforting. And even today, you know, still I feel so much more comfortable and like held by the darkness.
Hmm.
I mean, just darkness in general. But I've actually had that experience more deeply when I go to a silent meditation retreat.
Mhm.
And I spend it, I'm in the light, I'm in the world, but I'm in silence for 7 days. And leaving that space is really hard for me.
Mm. Hmm.
Going back into a world of being attached to my own story and being limited by language and having like
Mhm.
that's really hard for me.
Interesting. Yeah.
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 Um, yeah. Have you ever done anything like that?
No, I never have. I mean, that's just really fascinating to hear about, yeah, how your, yeah, and how your sensory world, or your, you know, it just heightens and adjusts, and that kind of oh, that's, I mean, the interesting thing when you talk about it too, it does make me think um there's a certain element, I don't know if this makes sense, this period that we're in obviously is very difficult for all of us, and for me, I've a lot to be grateful for. There are people that are going through much more extremely difficult circumstances than I am. um but there is a piece of for me around this experience that I want to keep when we come out of this, which is there's been a certain, for me, I just feel like there's been a certain simplifying of certain things, and I feel more gratitude now than I feel like I see things. It's ironic because, you know, we haven't been in contact with so many things I haven't seen, but in some ways I feel like I see things more fully now than I did before, when I was just kind of felt like I was kind of running from place to place. And there's a certain element where there's a certain part of that that I don't want to let go of when we come out of this.
Yes.
So
I mean,
um,
you know, you strike me as such a grounded person and a person who does live your life in gratitude. You know, the little interactions that I've had with you, but also seeing your work, you know. Um, and so I'm actually surprised that you haven't like practiced or studied Zen, or, you know, because you have such an energy about you that's, you're a very good listener, and it seems like you're totally
oh,
okay
thanks.
with like stillness and quiet, and I think that that's rare, and I hope that all of us are at least somewhat experiencing what you're experiencing, with, you know, of gratitude and not
Yeah,
wanting to forget about that once, if we speed up again,
right. Yeah.
you know. I wonder if has your perspective changed about theater during this experience?
Yeah, well, yeah, interestingly along that line, I mean, and it's a similar thing, like in terms of a, you know, I have a lot to be grateful for in terms of, um, you know, with our position with Ironweed, if, you know, we don't have we don't have a space, so there's certain things that certain expenses that right now that we don't have to meet, you know, monthly expenses that,
Right.
which I know, like, for example, you all in the Playhouse are not in that situation, you know, and other theaters, Teatro Progress and Actors Lab and International Shakespeare Company, where they're, you know, you have a building, you have a, you know, and there are expenses around that require things to happen during this period. And with us and with not having that situation, I have been looking at really trying to stay open to what things look like on the other side of this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that, like you're saying, like, I don't have that mindset for myself of, oh, I can't wait to, and I just want to do this. When we get back, we're going to do this and this and this. I have that feeling of like, I just want to see what it looks like and what stories are going to resonate with people, and what experiences. I mean, is it going to be one person on stage that right now that's going to be the most meaningful for, or I don't know, and so I think in a certain way, similarly, yeah, I want to just be open to that, just to be kind of open. And I know that I'm grateful to kind of be in a position where I can do that, you know. How about you? What are your feelings about how theater might shift or evolve through this crazy period and out of it, coming out of it?
Man, I mean, I don't know. It's like I'm watching different theaters do different things depending on what kind of resources they have. And really, I kind of just feel like theater will come back, right? Like, and yeah, it's more about what kind of stories are going to resonate. What do we want to hear? What do we want to experience? And it's so specific to where you are. And I think it will be even more so, right? Like the stories that our community in Santa Fe wants to hear and experience probably going to be different than than Brooklyn or than a town in Florida,
Right.
and I have discussions with myself about that a lot, coming from a big city, coming back here. I can't treat Santa Fe like New York. It's just because it's not. They're two totally different places and need different things. And I really feel like we as artistic directors and as artists in general, like we're in the service industry. We're here to serve, right? Telling stories and sharing parts of ourselves and connecting people. That's a service in my mind.
Yeah.
And I'm here to literally serve the community of Santa Fe. And it's been really hard for me this year because I can't go out and meet people and talk to people and knock on doors and say, hey, who are you? What do you need? What do you want? Right. So I don't know. I did watch this actually incredible, the old Vic is doing these filmed performances, like live filmed performances.
Wow.
And I watched Andrew Scott. Do you know Andrew Scott? Have you ever seen the Sherlock Holmes series?
Oh yeah.
So Andrew Scott is the villain.
Okay.
And he did a one-man show called Three Kings. And it was like watching a master class in acting.
Wow.
But it was the first thing that I have seen in the pandemic that but I mean, I think monologues, right? Are they the most interesting things to watch on camera? Like the live theater. Because if two people aren't in the same room, there's no ionic exchange.
Right.
But but I can watch somebody having an ionic exchange with themselves, I guess, right? Like
having
an experience.
Interesting.
So that gave me some hope, actually. I think your point of view is pretty good. I think I'm gonna just adopt that. Of let's see where we are. Let's see what theater, where theater is. But I think it'll come back.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think it'll be, it's just be a huge, there's a certain thing. It's been interesting when you're talking about the clown, the clown work and the clown study. To me, there's a certain element. I feel drawn to that, that kind of mode for coming back to the theater. Just that really, just being really simple and really present and like really allowing things to just kind of what comes up, and one connection with one person. That to me, that kind of like movement back into it feels really good. I mean, yeah. So.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just not that interested in glitz and glam either, right? Like, because we get that with movies, get that with action movies.
Right. It's
with our
true.
superheroes. And I mean, there's something different about live music and live singing and live dance,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But absolutely, I mean, it's about authenticity and heart. I think that's what people are going to want to be in the room with.
I think you're right. Oh, and I think you're totally right. Yeah. And I think, yeah, I agree. And I mean, I think just those stories too that can connect in whatever community it is, connect kind of wide swaths of people, is just would be really healing at that point. Um, I just speaking of just inventive ways of navigating this period that we're in, I just loved what you all did with the melodrama. I mean, the fact that when the melodrama is done on stage, I mean, Santa Fe is a big part of the story because of the references. But with the way you all did it, it was literally a part of the story, just in the places in Santa Fe where it happened. And what was that process like for you and Andy, just in terms of, how are we going to make this happen? Because it was really cool.
I laugh because, I mean, first of all, I loved working with Andy. I had a
Yeah.
lot of fun with him.
Yeah.
And I felt like that was the key, was fun, right?
Yeah.
Because it all happened so quickly, Scott. We decided that we were going to film it. And the deadline for the script was like a week later. And then we had to rewrite it because it wasn't really written for film. So we had to format it and rewrite it. And then we had to hire a crew and do the casting. And that all happened within like 2 weeks. And then we started shooting like 3 days after it was cast.
Wow.
And I think that and Annie had a broken ankle at that point.
Yeah.
So I think I was like the producer, the PA, the line producer, and the director, like 4 out of 8 days that we were shooting.
Wow.
And I mean, we would forget things at the theater, and there were people running back and forth. And one day we got totally busted at a location, and so we had to move everyone somewhere else.
Man.
And it was really amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
the only thing I can say about it is we decided to do it, and then we did it.
Yeah.
And there was like of course, after every project, I look back and I go, I would have done this differently, right? And I would have done many things differently with the melodrama, but the actors that we found that came out to audition were great. And they all just showed up every day and were so willing to be there and be present and do whatever it was that needed to be done. And if a line was rewritten, they just said, okay, I guess that's what it is. And, Andy has been doing the melodrama for like 10 years and had a really good sense of it. And he's a videographer. So he really knew what he was doing.
That's
so
cool.
There was like a lot of trust that developed. And I mean, it was such a great process. And I look forward to making another web series, one that can be a little bit more intentional.
Well, it had such a great immediacy of spirit, like it was just this raw, wonderful, like this, as you said, this fun, just immediacy to the whole thing, which is really cool. Yeah.
I'm really glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I'm really glad, because that was the point, right? That's always the point of the melodrama.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's so. And so for folks that might not know the Playhouse or might just be interested in how can I support the Playhouse, like how can people support the Playhouse right now?
Yeah. So you can just go to our website, which is www.santafeplayhouse.org. No spaces, no caps, and there's a donate button right there on the home page on the top bar, and And we have a program called the Young Playwrights Project. And we, right now, all of that is being done over Zoom. Marguerite Louise Scott, who's a playwright, is teaching all those classes. Oh, and Quinn Fontaine
Cool.
does one class a week, and they work with kids and teens on playwriting and improv and nonviolent communication. And it's a really amazing program.
Wow.
And so, and you can decide, I'm bringing it up because you can decide if you want to donate. The Playhouse supports YPP. So your donation will go to whatever it needs to go to. But if you want to specifically donate to YPP, you can choose to do so.
Yeah. Great.
There as well. Yeah.
Cool. Well, it's really inspiring to see what you all are doing and generating in just a really challenging time for all of us.
Well, we really appreciate your Shelter in Plays, content, and everyone who has given to that series.
Such a great idea.
Well, and I really think there's something there, and that's probably the one thing we'll continue doing, through 2021 and maybe even 2022. To, like, now that I'm discovering, monologues are really special. They can be.
Well, that was such a great idea. Yeah. Before we kind of get to the kind of wrap up, I did want to talk to you a little bit about your experiences in DC. We've got these interesting intersections with my time there, because I was reading about your experiences there with Keenan Fellowship, and because I was in DC from 87 to 96.
Wow.
And so it's interesting because there's 3 shows that you are involved with assistant directing, and I want to talk about your experiences there, but 3 shows that you had there that just have these interesting intersections with my time in DC. One, you directed it at assistant directed at Woolly Mammoth. And so I graduated from college after having that amazing experience, with that theater teacher. And my first acting class in DC was at what is now the Woolly Mammoth space, but it was at the Studio Theater Acting Conservatory. And it was literally, our first class was the last class that they were having there, because they were moving across the street to the studio's new home. And then Woolly Mammoth was going to move into, where they are now. I guess they're still on 14th and P. Is that where they? Yeah. So they were, they were just, moving as I started studying there. And then, because you assisted directed Everything is Illuminated at Theater J, right?
Yes.
Well, so I met my wife, Lisa, at a mutual friend of ours put together, she was going to rent a group house with 4 people. And she put together 4 mutual friends of hers. None of us really knew each other. And so Lisa was one and I was one. And one of our other roommates was Randy Hoflick, who was at that time was the artistic director of Theater J.
Wow.
So anyway, I just have these memories of us being down in our kitchen, and Randy would be on her phone. She would be calling back patrons to confirm their reservations for the show. And I was like, little did I know that not too much longer after that, I'd be in Santa Fe doing the same thing. But the other interesting little intersection is because you directed our town, assistant directed our town at the Olney. My first professional experience was with the National Players they were based out of Catholic University, a touring company, and they do a Shakespeare play and a contemporary play. And they were based out of Catholic University, but Jim Petosa was one of the artistic directors, and he was also artistic director at Olney. Wonderful man. He's at the Boston University now, just an incredible artist and great man. And so when we were back in town on tour, we would stay at the actor housing at the Olney. I don't know if it's still there. It's that old house and the old kitchen where everyone would hang out. Wow. So
Still there.
wow. So that's where we would like we'd come back into town and we'd stay at the actor housing and hang out and go to the opening night parties and anyway. So wow. So that housing is still
Yeah, that is
wow.
so cool. Yeah, I when I was working on that show, I think I made lunch in that kitchen one day.
Wow.
And there were just all these young, like hip actors around, like, yeah, living in there and part of because they have a company too.
Yeah.
That they take, yeah.
Well,
Wow, what a trip.
so well, how was your experience? What was that experience like in
At the
DC?
Only or just
Well,
in
the whole
DC?
just that DC experience.
I mean, it was a whirlwind. Like I had the Kennedy Center name behind me, basically just like a stamp of approval. But it was up to me to figure out like who I wanted to work with and then how I was going to get into the door.
Yeah.
Now, I had the wind at my back with the Kennedy Center, but I still had to, make the connections and meet the people. And I was really lucky because I just worked on show after show after show with these like amazing directors at these great theaters. And I was meeting so many people and I was seeing so much theater.
Mm-hmm.
And, but I was working all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
wow.
Every day, all the time. And I don't regret it, but I wish that I had also been like trying to get the future jobs while I was working on current jobs.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a great experience. I got to work with Marty Lyons at Woolley
Mm-hmm.
on a world premiere of a play. And that was just incredible for so many reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Shakespeare Theater.
Well, yeah.
It's just,
yeah.
I'm going back into my memory at these spaces, like their rehearsal spaces and their theaters, and
mm-hmm.
just how organized every single place was, and
yeah.
how professional and how like honored and respected everyone. You walk into a rehearsal room and it's just everybody's there on time with their scripts and their pencils. And yeah, it was the most professional theater setting, just working on shows back to back to back to back. I've never had that experience any other time in my life.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, totally does. What a great experience. Yeah. And DC is it's such a cool theater city.
Such a cool theater city. I really liked their public transportation.
Yeah.
I lived in Maryland. So I commuted, but I had my car and then I would take public transportation a lot as well. And DC it definitely, coming from New York, it was very different though. Just the vibration of that town. I only was there for a year and a half. So it sounds like you were there for almost a decade.
Yeah, during but yeah, I can't believe how long ago it's been now. But wow, yeah, that's great.
Yeah, it was wild. And I got to work with Aaron Posner twice, which was, I liked working with the same director multiple times.
Oh, gosh.
And I really got to know that person and like what they needed. And then I also felt more comfortable using my voice in the room, right?
Sure.
Because I didn't have to start over every time.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just the people I met, so wonderful and talented, and just a very family oriented feeling in DC.
That's I remember that too. I felt that too. Yeah, really. Yeah, it felt like it's not small town isn't the right word, but very community feeling around a big city. Yeah, I felt that too. That's cool. Well, for my last question, I just wanted to ask you what is there kind of one either experience you've had or just kind of typical experience that you have in the theater, whether it's acting, whether it's directing, where when you have or when you had that experience, you just knew like in your heart, like, this is why I love doing this.
Hmm. I mean, I, I think almost every show that I work on is, beautiful and makes me feel like I'm coming home in a different way.
Mm.
Acting and directing are very different experiences for me, especially now. But I will say that when I played Catherine in A View from the Bridge by Arthur Miller at the Guthrie Theater, and John Carroll Lynch was playing my uncle, and there's this incredible actress playing my aunt, and I mean, they had tailor-made all of my costumes, and and it took place in the like 30s, so the style was just totally different, and I just transformed every time I put on those costumes. And I remember being in the dressing room at the Guthrie, and I think we were like 4 weeks already into performances. And I sat down and I had my costume on, and I just looked at this dressing room like full of these older, amazing actresses. And I was like, this is it. Like, this isn't like, this is all I ever want to do. This is what all the work was for. And, I just felt really humbled and excited to go out and do the show again. It was also the longest running show that I was in.
Yeah.
I think we ran it for like 3 months or something.
Wow.
And that's really special to be able to allow a character to grow for that long.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a beautiful memory. Thank you for making me remember that.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Robyn.
Yeah.
And Robyn, just thank you so much for this conversation. It's been fun. It's been enlightening. It's been thought-provoking. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Scott. It was the best part of my day. Thank you so much for engaging. Yeah. Thank you.
I really enjoyed this. And thank you all very much for joining us as well. And if you are not on our email list and would like to join so you can find out about future upcoming interviews, you can email me at ironweedsantafe@gmail.com. We'll post this also on our Facebook page, which is at Ironweed Santa Fe, and also Theater Santa Fe, which is a wonderful organization that supports theater in Santa Fe. They have been gracious enough to put all of our interviews on their website, which is theatersantafe.org. They have an online tab, and they have all, which will now be 27 interviews on their website, so you can check them out there. But thank you all again for joining us. Thank you, Robyn, so much. And everyone have a safe, healthy, and happy holiday season. Good night.